Columbia Business School Asian Alumni Club. I'm a co-founder and also co-chair of the Alumni Club. On behalf of Columbia Business School, I would like to thank you for signing up for this fun webinar about the business of wine. We have two distinguished speakers tonight. Mr. Pindar Damianos. He is the owner and also general manager of Pindar Vineyards, located in Long Island. And we also have Professor Jeremy Kagan. Some of you might have met him on campus. He is a professor and also faculty director of the Digital Marketing Strategy Executive Program of Columbia Business School. Without further ado, I would like to turn the time to these two speakers.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I see people still piling in here and the numbers are going up. If you're just joining us, this is the Business of Wine. Thank you, Paulina, for that introduction. My name is Jeremy Kagan, and I'm a professor over at Columbia Business School, as some of you may know. I teach digital marketing, but a little known fact, I actually got married in Napa Valley, so I've been known to have a glass of wine or two. Today's webinar, in addition to giving me an excuse to wear a collared shirt for the first time in weeks, is going to be a great way for us to dig in to the business of wine with Pindar Damianos, who is the namesake of Pindar Vineyards. And we're going to talk about a few topics today. I do want to encourage you to enter any questions you might have in the chat window. I just put a little note in there myself. You don't have to rush or anything, but towards the end, I'm going to try to pick some of the best that haven't been covered and ask them for Pindar on your behalf. You'll notice you're muted. That's because with the amount of people we've got registered, it would quickly disintegrate into a terrible cacophony. So we're going to just let me talk right now, and Pindar will do most of the information giving here. Now, to start with, we're going to ask him a little bit about the history of the oldest family-owned vineyard on Long Island and how it became that, and also some of the impacts that Pindar discussed with me in our prep sessions on preserving open space in Long Island. We'll then talk about the business of wine, and we're going to ask a little bit about how COVID-19 and the current crisis may have impacted him, from changing the way his business has visitors and online operations, and what he thinks might last longer there. We'll then talk a little bit about climate change and whether he's seeing an impact on his own business and the business of wine. And then finally, to turn to something a little more positive, we'll talk about some of the green initiatives they have and leave on a happy note of all the good things they're doing to be green and efficient with their energy. And at the end, I'll have to ask one of Pindar's team to put a link up so we can figure out where to buy a nice bottle of wine when we want to follow up. So if that's what you're expecting, you're in the right place. If you are looking for a different webinar, we won't be hurt if you have to drop off and find it. With that, let's talk to Pindar himself. Pindar, when we talked, you mentioned that you have the oldest family vineyard on the North Fork of Long Island, and there was a lot of implications to that. Could you tell us a little bit about Pindar Vineyards and its related vineyards, and sort of how it started and how it's grown? I know the story involves other members of your family, so if you give us a little bit of a background about how you ended up here today.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here. Thank you for the introduction. The winery was established in 1978. Our first wines were made in 1980. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. It really started with my father, who was a doctor in Stony Brook. In 1978, he got interested in the agriculture on Long Island. At that time, it was very well known for the potato industry, as well as vegetables, but predominantly it was a potato industry. And then about 1978, the grape industry first was established. It started with a small planting of 30 acres with a few different varieties like Cabernet, Merlot, Chardonnay. And then from there, it just kind of grew from there to over 400 acres. We produce about 70,000 cases of wine a year. Our production is fairly large for the island. I think we're the largest producer of wine. And also over the years, we've established some other wineries, Duckwalk Vineyards being in Southampton, and also a small boutique winery called Jason's Vineyard in Jamesport.
Now, can you give us a little perspective? In 1978, when you established the vineyard, about how many people were doing what you were doing on the island at the time?
At that time, there was only about 2 or 3 other wineries starting to establish itself. A lot of research went into Long Island growing grapes through Cornell and upstate. And at that time, about 3 other wineries were starting off as well. And then it grew from there. It started with 3, and I think there's probably over 40 wineries on Long Island. And I think approximately 3,000 acres are in grapes on Long Island right now. And that makes us the 3rd largest region in the state when it comes to acreage.
And what would these other 2 regions be?
Predominantly the Finger Lakes, and I think the Hudson Valley area falls in those 3.
Well, it sounds like it'd be much easier to visit you. Could you tell us a little bit about those early years then? You mentioned potatoes and some other vegetables. I think we all would agree that grapes are better for all of us. Can you tell us why, for example, there was so much growth on the North Fork versus the South Fork of Long Island, where you have one of your other vineyards?
Well, Long Island was predominantly potatoes. And I think at that time, the industry was changing from the potato industry as a major commodity out here. And I think the next generation didn't really want to get into that farming aspect. They ended up having other aspirations and not wanting to really be involved in the family farm. And as that time, back in the late 70s, a lot of the farmers wanted to get out of the potato industry because there wasn't that second generation. And I think that's where the grape industry kind of fell into preserving the North Fork. If you compare it to other regions, the North Fork versus the South Fork, there's a lot of development. And I think the grape industry as a whole has helped keep the North Fork pristine and kept it from being overdeveloped, as you see in other areas of Long Island. And I think that's what really preserved the North Fork. And if you come out here, I call it God's country because it still is very pristine, and you still see the farm and the family farm, and you still see that agriculture, which at one point Long Island was all agriculture, if you can imagine that, in the 50s and the 60s and before that. So I think it's a culmination of preservation and also establishing a whole new industry out here that's grown. Like I said, it started with 3 and now it's over 40. And now we're seeing another round of industry where the breweries are starting. We're seeing that industry thrive. We're also seeing hops being grown on the North Fork. So there's another evolution coming, and I think that'll be in the distilleries and the beer industry as well.
So you're saying our happy hour habits can maybe help us preserve open space on Long Island. So we're doing good by having those habits ourselves. For those of you who are just jumping on, I know we've had a bunch of people just join in. I'm talking to Pindar Damianos of Pindar Vineyards, and we're discussing a little bit about how his vineyard came to today. So Pindar, if you could kind of elaborate a little bit on your own journey to running the vineyard. Your father started it. What was your journey, and how did your business education and ultimately viticultural education come to play in taking over?
There was 5 of us in the family. My father, like I said, was a doctor and an internist, had a very lucrative practice in the Stony Brook area with Stony Brook University as well. He always, growing up, we were always involved in the winery, just as being children around him and watching him, starting to build an industry, which, we were the pioneers, I would think. There was no wine industry at all. So I think I was around it. He always told us that we could be anything we wanted in this lifetime. We could go to college and be doctors. I found a love for the agricultural part of the wine industry, and that was my love. I always enjoyed growing the grapes and knowing that hard work goes into high quality wines. So for me, the agricultural part, was something that I really enjoyed. I ended up graduating from high school and then going off to college in California. I got a degree in enology, which is winemaking and viticulture. And then I came back after I finished my degree and started working in the vineyard and managing the vineyard. And I still am part of the growing aspect of the business, but with my father's passing, I've had to take on a little more responsibility. And I find myself managing all the aspects of the business, if it be the viticulture part, the enology part, the business part, or the retail part. I feel like I have a hand on each of those aspects in the business as itself.
And one of the few businesses where, when we say getting your hands dirty, it's actually a literal thing for you.
Absolutely, especially when you're growing a product. You know, we're weather dependent. There's all aspects of that part, and then you really see your hard work when the wines are bottled and aged and bottled and released, and then you get the opportunity to see the customers try those wines and really enjoy it. So it's a lot of hard work, but it's satisfying as well.
Well, let's take a moment then to look at that business of wine. If you could tell us a little bit about how that actually breaks down. So, you know, what part of the vineyard is sold through distributors, through direct channels? How does that work out? Is it regional? And also, if you could tell us, are there other things in your operations? And I'm going to obviously ask you to compare this sort of before and after our current situation today and where you see it might going in the future. So have you, you obviously, you're sitting in your lovely tasting room. For those of you who are wondering what that beautiful room behind him is. So you're obviously not having as many visitors, I would imagine, this summer. Can you break down how that works out in a normal year and what changes you've seen then during our current crisis in summer of lockdown?
So there's probably, there's four aspects of the wine industry. There's or four pieces, I call it. There's the distribution piece, there's the retail piece, there's the online piece, and there's also a retail part, especially in our business, because we own a satellite wine shop in a town called Port Jefferson, which is about an hour west of the winery, a small boating community with a great walking town. So those are the four pieces. Prior to COVID, our distribution was always a strong part of the winery. We've always distributed our wines. Our wines are distributed through Empire, which is based in Astoria, New York. I think they're the second largest distributor in the country. And we've always been strong in distribution. Our real strong point is the wine shops. We distribute a lot of wines on Long Island, New York City, upstate New York, some areas of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and a little bit of New Jersey. So distribution has always been a key point in our business, just because I think early on we made wines that were food friendly and a little bit on the semi-sweet part, and it just took off. So we've always been very strong in the distribution part of it. And then the second piece would be the tasting room, which now we're 40 years into it, and we have many visitors come through the tasting room. It's an old potato barn retrofitted into a tasting room. You can come in and do a tasting at any of the tasting bars, and then you can buy bottles. We do tours and special events. So that's one part of it. And then there's the retail outlet in Port Jefferson, which is a satellite of the winery. In New York State, you're permitted to have 2 satellites off of your winery. So in that store, you can go in and do tastings as well. It's a small retail outlet. And then there's the online aspect.
And now, has the online aspect been big in the past?
No. Speaking of the COVID, from March 15th to now, starting the year, we had growth. We've had growth. The business has always grown. And we were seeing a growth curve again from January 1st to March 15th. Again, distribution strong, going off the holidays, and then tasting rooms starting to open. We really get going probably April when the weather really breaks. Then you really get the foot traffic. So we were still seeing growth in the winter, and we were heading into a great spring and summer where we thought we were going to see sales again increasing. As of March 15th, the tasting room was at a full stop, and then we saw the online growth like we've never seen it before. And I've seen numbers, and I think I pulled numbers today. I think from March 15th to the end of July, which we're getting close, we're up over 400% in online sales, which we've never seen. I mean, we have growth in online, but not what we were seeing in that time period.
And that seems to match well with what we're seeing in sort of industry reports of up to 500% increase in online sales of in this category as well. We are getting a couple questions, and some of them are appropriate for this part of the conversation. So someone is asking, given that this has all changed, how are you handling things like consumer sampling and brand awareness with both your tasting room and probably a lot of the restaurants you sell your product through closed? Is there anything else you're doing to make up for that? So how's COVID changed that approach?
All right, talking about the distribution part, we saw growth in that from March until now. I think we're up over 30% just on the distribution part. And that was because the retail outlets were still essential. So people are still purchasing wines. And I think with everything that went on, I think consumers were focused in on buying local because of the safety factor. I'm not sure what that determined, but they were buying a lot more local wines. So we saw a 30 to 40% increase in the distribution. The retail and the tasting room took the hardest hit besides the online. And now with the reopen, you're still able to come into the tasting room. You're still able to do tastings. This has changed the last 4 or 5 weeks. There's been as we got into different stages of reopening. At this point right now, you're able to walk into the tasting room. Everything is socially distanced. Each sales part of the tasting room has shields, and you're having to wear a mask, but you're able to go to the tasting bar and still do a tasting, but the tastings are put on small plates or trays and in plastic cups, and then the tastings have to be taken outside, where you sit on the deck or the patio, and you're able to take your mask off and then try the wines from there. And we're still open. We're able to have music now. And things are getting back to normal, but we're just doing a lot more things safely to keep our customers safe.
Well, have you done anything that's more creative? Like someone's asked, have you tried any virtual tastings or something that maybe you hadn't done that you were forced to experiment with during this like a virtual tasting? Have you done those?
Absolutely. Early March, late March, we started doing virtual tastings. You were able to purchase 3 bottles of wine, shipped to your house, and then on a certain date, you were able to Zoom in with the winemaker or myself, and we were able to talk through the wines. We did that. We also offered curbside pickup. You were able to come to the winery, pick up wine. We would bring it outside to your car. We also did local delivery, which we've really never done to the local area, and we were able to deliver. And we also did that in our Port Jeff location as well. We were doing local delivery. But then the online really kicked in, and that really carried us through from March to mid-June when we were able to finally have foot traffic again. It did make us change the way we do tastings and have that one-on-one contact with people. But so far it's worked out. We're able to have music again, and that's helps, brings people out. They're able to spread out. So all in all, it's been a real learning experience through this, but innovation, yes, and those aspects of the curbside and the online business had forced us to open up more states so we could ship more wines. I think we're able to ship to over 40 states, so we really grew the growth of shipping out of state, out of New York. So there were some good things that came of it as well.
Well, let me ask you if you've seen anything that maybe some of your neighbors or similar vineyards have done that you thought might be innovative or interesting to try.
I have. I've seen a couple of wineries do a drive up, almost like a stand outside. You pull up to your car. I think you phone in the call or you order it online, and then you pull into the drive up, and they either carry the wine to your trunk, or you're able to take the wines right there. And I've seen a lot of innovation, but I think a lot of the wineries offered the curbside and the online. I could just tell from them picking the UPS or 7-Day Express picking up wines from us and seeing that other wineries were doing well on the online aspect as well.
So that sounds like there's been a lot of ways to get around the fact that you haven't been able to do things in person. But for example, you sold these 3 wines to folks and then conducted virtual tastings. Is that an example of something you might continue, say, during the winter when people can't come in person as easily? Or are there any other innovations you've seen that, aside from probably just selling more online generally, that you think are sort of a new normal or a change that'll stick with you?
I think we will carry the online tastings. I think, especially heading past the fall into the winter, I think we might end up doing virtual tours of the winery. We may do virtual tours of when we get into harvest, when we start harvesting grapes in the end of August, beginning of September. We may do some kind of virtual tour that involves seeing the production of the grapes being harvested, processed, and then fermented in tanks. And then maybe towards the spring, when we start bottling wines, there may be some virtual tours of that as well. I think people like to see machinery and that process. So, and maybe some barrel tastings as well. So yes, I think that, I don't think that aspect of it has stopped. I think there will be another round of virtual as we get into the fall and the winter months. Absolutely. And maybe some virtual tastings as well with chocolate, doing pairings. We do dessert wines and champagnes. There could be a few virtual tastings that way, where we pair with a truffle person in New York City, and they purchase the truffles as well as the wine, and then they can do a virtual pairing as well.
So do you think with these new ideas for collaboration and virtual tours and tastings, you might need to, for example, hire someone to be in charge of that and expand your services in that direction? So this could be a net positive for that aspect of the business.
I hope so.
Too early to say?
I think it's too early to say, because we're in the July months, and we're seeing the foot traffic again, even though it's spread out, and we had to reduce our tables outside and reduce some of the seating inside. But I'm still seeing, I still believe that that the customers or people in general still want to have that ability, if it's done safely, to still have the ability to come into the winery and enjoy themselves. I think they've been cooped up for a long time, and I think people still want to venture out, but we give our customer base everything across the board. We still do the curbside. If you're not comfortable coming into the winery, we're glad to carry the wine out to your car. We have the social distancing within the tasting room. If you're not comfortable with doing a tasting and having that up close contact, then you have the ability to buy a bottle of wine, one of Pindar wines, and sit outside and enjoy it with family and friends. So, or you can still walk into the tasting room, purchase wine, and take it to your backyard. So, I just think
it's optionality, though. You were basically saying that the new normal will basically have a lot more options for people.
Yes, absolutely. It will. I don't see us getting back to, I don't see, I think it's more, I think the question is more, what have we lost with the coronavirus? I think we lost the coming up to the tasting bar and reading a sheet and picking 5 wines and doing that tasting and staying at the tasting bar and sampling that wine with friends around you and having the interaction between the person that's pouring you the wine and the customer. That's what we lost. And that's not such a great thing, because you really lose the aspect, you really lose that customer one-on-one. I mean, you come up to a tasting room, you've never been here before, we make so many different wines. Having the ability to try a wine, and if it's not your liking, to be able to sway the customer to a different wine that they may like, and you're not getting that initial reaction. You're having to take the tasting to your table, and you're only reacting to yourself or the people around you. You're not able to react to myself or a professional tasting person. That's what we lost. And but I think that's only one part of what we lost. The rest can be solved. You have a lot of space, you spread out tables. You lose tables inside, then you just have to take the tastings outside. So we lost some, but we gained some too. We've learned, like the online, like the virtual, the things we've grown, and we'll lose some on the back end as well. But I think as a whole, it will work itself out.
So we did have a question that fits really well right in here. Did you notice any change in consumers' tastes or the kinds of wines they're buying for either because of the way the tastings are different or just generally because people are drinking at home? Any noticeable patterns or same exact profile of purchases and consumption?
More varietals. I've seen a lot more varietal wines like Sauvignon Blanc, Rosé, Riesling. Still saw growth on the varietals of red wine like Cabernet and Merlot, and our Bordeaux blends, but we're still early in the summer, so most consumers are drinking white wines and rosés at this point. But I definitely have seen growth, and we've seen growth in the distribution part of it too, the wine shops. Some of our wines that were always popular have become more popular. So we're actually we made projections to bottle certain wines this year, and we ended up having to bottle more wines this last month to make up the growth in the distribution arm of it. So that was a good thing.
Well, that actually answers some questions that also came in, but let me sort of ask you to elaborate a little on that. Someone wanted to know how you're able to raise brand awareness. You said you're now shipping to 40 states. How do you create that demand without the ability to do tastings or as much in-person, access to showing people what the wines taste like? And then we did have some folks asking about any changes from your original wines that you said were more on the sweet side. And if you could just tell us what your top sellers are now and how that's changed.
As far as the branding, Pindar has always had a very strong brand recognition. We did open up the 40 states, and we've seen growth in those 40 states that I wouldn't think knew about Pindar, but obviously they do. I think that is a culmination of Long Islanders leaving Long Island and moving to Georgia, North Carolina, moving to Ohio or Maine. And I just think our customer base was always there. They're originally from Long Island. They've grown up drinking Pindar wines, and we lost the 40 states because of shipping laws. And I think that they were able to reconnect with Pindar because they were originally from Long Island at some point, or they lived in the city. So they knew the Pindar brand.
Right now you're building on the strength of your brand with New Yorkers, when they're sort of expatriates at this point.
Yes, and we've had a lot of growth, even with the states that we did have originally, which was Florida, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Because we're on the island, we have so many so many visitors from all those states. Those states we were able to ship in, and we saw growth in those states as well, even though we had the licenses prior to this. And as far as the wines, we've always made the 4 seasons. That was the introduction to wine. If you can imagine, back in the late 70s, Long Islanders did not drink wine. They drank beer and spirits. So we introduced the four seasons, which is winter white, spring splendor, summer blush, and autumn gold. And those were on the sweeter side as an introduction for wine. If my father was alive, he would say that most Long Islanders didn't drink wine, and the object was to educate people about wine. And the hope is that they drink wine, and then eventually their palates mature and they start to drink drier wines. And that's what we do. We make over 23 different wines from the four seasons all the way up to champagne or sparkling wine to port wines. So we, across the board, we may make 6 semi-sweet wines, and then we make 15 dry wines. So when you come here, there's always a wine for your palate. So you're always going to have the four seasons are always the driving force of the winery. It's just because they're so well known. But if you come here and you have the Sunflower Chardonnay, or you have Sauvignon Blanc, or the Rosé, or any of the other wines, they're as beautiful as any wines that we make. All our wines across the board are solid and high quality.
Well, it sounds like you've got basically, you've increased the variety quite a bit since the early days. I do have a couple of questions this is a business school crowd, of course, so I have a couple more business-focused questions, and then I'd like to segue into some of your long careers observations about climate change. So first, somebody asked right at the beginning, if you could give us a sense of how you measure profitability and success for your different lines of wine. Is it by segment? Is it any specific metrics you use? Is it just the raw numbers, or is it that some wines are more profitable than others, and you focus on those as better lines of work?
It's all profit. It's all cost of product. If you were to compare the four seasons to mythology, the cost to produce mythology is a lot higher than producing the four seasons, just because the aging process, the care that we take in the vineyard, and all the agricultural aspects of growing grapes, which is not easy. So really, based on the cost and our profitability, of course, you make more money on the varietal business. I mean, if we could sell all varietals, we could probably close the doors in December and reopen in April. But we make the four seasons. Some call it a lost leader. When you're in a wine industry that is Long Island, and it's still back then was trying to establish itself as a wine industry. I mean, we're starting from zero and working our way up. It's not like we're in California or the Finger Lakes that have been doing this for a lot of years. So you come out with a lost leader, and but that's what you have to do in order to get people, especially on Long Island, to start consuming their own wines in their backyard. If my father was alive, he would tell you, if every New Yorker bought New York wines, we wouldn't be able, this island, there wouldn't be enough wine in the whole state of New York. We would be completely sold out. And that's what has happened in California. If you go to California, which I did, I went to school for many years there, they support their local products, their California wines. It's all they drink. If New Yorkers did that, which they are after 40 years, we wouldn't be able to produce enough wines, and that would be a good thing, I guess.
That would be a great thing.
Yeah.
And let's shift gears a little bit right now, and then we'll return to a few questions that are coming in. One of the things we wanted to talk about is you've been doing this for a while, and your family has. Have you noticed any impact from climate change to the way things are growing, to your business directly? And what kinds of things are you doing right now in your vineyard and your business to take a more green approach to the business?
I'll take the green question, because I can really, having the agricultural background, I can really talk about our initiatives. When it comes to the vineyard, we're very pro integrated pest management, an IPM program. We don't spray the vineyard or do any of those chemical sprays unless we have to. We use the IPM program. We do composting. We don't use synthetic fertilizers. We try to be as green as possible and take that initiative. And also in the winery aspect, we have a 100K wind turbine that we installed in 2007. And that wind turbine powers the winemaking facility. So we're basically off the grid when it comes to the wine production part of the winery. That would be all the fermenting of the wines, the bottling, the warehousing. So that's just completely off the grid. And we've been off the grid since 2005 with the wind turbine. As far as the growing or the agricultural part of the winery, yes, I think we've seen hotter summers. Or warmer summers. This would be one of those growing seasons. And I've seen through the years, I've been growing grapes for almost 15 years. I've seen milder winters, and I've seen warmer summers and rainier springs or rainier falls. So yes, climate change does play a part of it. When you're growing grapes, they love dry weather. They don't really like that rainy aspect in the fall because their skins are softening and they're starting to really ripen. So yes, I've seen over the years, I've seen milder winters and warmer summers that haven't been normal. And this is a year we haven't had rain in over a month. It's almost to the point where we're talking about putting on irrigation, which we love to dry farm because they're grapevines. Their vines, their root system goes down 6 feet. So they don't really need that rain or that irrigation part. But this year we've seen quite a dry summer.
And it sounds like that's become a little bit more, that's been increasing frequency over your span of cultivation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you're doing a lot of things on the island to, reduce your footprint and be green. And it sounds like you're noticing some effects of climate change. Are you seeing that impact in other areas of the world? Is it affecting your competition from California to Europe to maybe lesser known areas? And would you consider, are you considering expanding on Long Island or in other places? What do you think the change in the wine growing regions is in general?
As a whole, I see growth. We're kind of our own region, so I don't see when you go into a wine shop, you're able to go to a New York section. So there's New York wines, and that took 40 years to grow that part of it. So we've seen the growth of New York wines. I don't know globally or in the United States if I see the competition as much as if I was another California wine competing with another California wine. We're kind of on our own little niche here. But our distribution is so strong that I think we compete with price-wise of other regions, which some of the smaller wineries, I'm not sure if they can really compete with their margins to be competitive in the rest of the wine industry. Whereas Pindar, we're able to compete with some of the larger California brands, and I see growth in there. I don't feel like we're not able to grow the brand in the distribution aspect. And in the retail aspect, there's so much growth. I mean, we live next to the biggest city in the world. I mean, if everybody came out and visited all the wineries, there's endless amount of visitors every weekend or in the course of a year. And there's many that have never even lived in New York City their whole lives, didn't realize there was a winery in their backyard. So there's plenty of growth. There's still an industry of 40 wineries that have a regional organization that promotes the industry and promotes Long Island wine. So there's growth there, especially with that organization, and trying to get the brands out in New York City. And because we're very strong on Suffolk and Nassau County, upstate New York, but New York is a harder market because there's a lot of competition when it comes to other brands, especially in New York City.
That makes a lot of sense, but it does sound a lot of your focus is it sounds like a lot of your focus is on local and being in the New York section. So being a part of that, buying local movement. Do you see that anything, I have two questions that came in that are relevant here. One is, do you do any private label business? And if so, is it a big part of it? Is it something that's common in your colleague vineyards out there? Or is this something where it's much more on your own labels?
We predominantly produce everything under the Pindar label. We also own Duckwalk and Jason, so that's two other brands that fall under the Pindar or the Damianos brand. We've played around with custom labeling for a few of the restaurants, but it's not really that's not really a big part of the equation. Our facility is very big, so we're able to produce other people's wines, and that's where there's growth. We're able to. Some of the smaller producers don't have the ability to have a winery, the expense and things like that, so they're able to bring their grapes to us. We're able to process it, age it, and bottle it. We have a full facility from start to finish, so we're able to do that, and that's really a lot of our business is producing other people's wines. If they have a smaller facility, a smaller winery that doesn't want to go to the expense of all the equipment to make wine.
So it sounds like not as much on the private label business, but you are doing bottling and some of the processing for other vintners out there.
Yes, yeah, that's a big part of. And we have over 400 acres. There's years that we'll sell some of our fruit, and they'll buy our fruit, and we'll harvest the fruit and process it at our facility, and then they'll buy the finished wine or the bottled wine and label it under their label and sell it. So there's growth in that aspect of the production part.
That's interesting. We got an interesting question that also I'm very curious as to myself. Someone just asked if you actually use some sort of scientific method where you're measuring the characteristics of the wine, like the acids and the sugars and things like that, in a very a quantifiable way, or are you doing your wine preparations based on taste and sort of a more qualitative approach, depending on your own senses of what it tastes like and what you're aiming for? How do you produce your wines like that?
It's all science. We have a great winemaker who's been here with us for 4 years, a New York kid who has an enology degree, smart guy, about my age, in the 40s. So he knows what the new and upcoming things that are going to come across the board, but everything is science. We'll go and sample the grapes. We look for sugars and acids. We run tests. We have a full-on lab. Everything is science when you come to producing wine from start to finish, but it is the taste aspect as well. And when you have finished wines and you're, sometime in January, February, we'll start putting blends together. And that's where the taste aspect comes in. We'll taste different lots. We'll try different tanks and different lots, and we'll make blends based on taste. And also looking at last year's production and last year's numbers of sales and what the curve is. We're always looking for what's going to be the new hottest variety coming up, and we're always planting new varieties and taking varieties out. A couple of years ago, Riesling got hot, so we started planting Riesling. A couple of years, 2 years ago, we started planting Pinot Grigio and more Sauvignon Blanc. So we're always looking at the curve and seeing what the new, what consumers, how their tastes are going to change over the next few years. But it's all based on science. If you talk to our winemaker, he runs a full lab from the beginning of September until the last bottle is bottled. Because we'll run tests prior to bottling to make sure the wines are stable. There's all kinds of aspects, especially when you're dealing with a wine product.
Well, there's definitely a few more questions coming in. I have one or two left, and then I'll just pull out a sampling from what's coming in on the chat window. But one of the things I wanted to ask you and give you a chance to sort of expand upon is you touched on planting some new varieties of wine. Where do you see Pindar Vineyards and sort of the industry on Long Island in say 5 to 10 years? What trends and that may be driven by COVID or maybe just more broad trends do you see happening, and what would you kind of hope would happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Like any business, a lot of growth. I see the industry continuing to grow, the wine industry as a whole. I see younger consumers starting to drink wine, so that's promising. And I think you're going to see more lighter wines like Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio taking another wave of growth on that. We just came out with wine in a can. We make 3 wines in a 4-pack in a beer style can or soda can. We did that 2 years ago. Growth on that aspect. People want to have the ability to take wine on the boat or the pool to the beach. So we've seen growth in the can industry, and I think you'll see growth in cans in the whole entire industry. You're seeing a lot from California probably 3 years ago. The East Coast is just starting to produce cans, a lot more wineries upstate. So there's growth there. I think we'll stay with our staples because they're generational. I think the wines are generational, but we'll continue to play with different varieties. This year we came out with a dry Gewürztraminer under my father's label, the Dr. Dan's collection, and a white blend. We come out with limited production wines like Viognier, which is an Australian variety. It's not grown widely on the island. So we'll continue to play with small varietals, give them to our wine club or release them in limited production. So we're always playing with new ideas, innovative. We've always been innovative, and especially when you're one of the first wineries, you were the first pretty much to do everything on the island. You were the first to make champagne or sparkling wine. You were the first to make a Bordeaux blend. So, as we grow, we're continuing to come out with new products and be innovative as well. So there's always growth if you're innovative. If you stay stagnant and your business is stagnant, then why bother? We're always looking for new ideas, and the cans, like I said, the cans, there's a generation that laughs at it, and then there's a generation that loves it. So it was just like this. Someone told me the same thing. It was just like when the screw cap came out. Everybody wanted the cork. Cork. I always had, my wines are always in cork. Now there's a whole another generation that love the screw cap, that hate having a. So it's the same as the can. It's going to take time to grow in that aspect. But if you reflect back, the cork versus the screw cap, it's the same. I think it's the same thing that went on with the cans.
Well, I've just taken the liberty of putting your website where you can get more information into the chat window. And I guess the last question I'll have before I take a few more from the chat window here is what is the secret password we have to say at the tasting room to get some of these cool limited edition varietals that you're mentioning?
You just got to tap me on the shoulder and say you were part of the webinar. I'll remember, and there's always a private stash somewhere. If not, we hold wines back and re-release them as library wines. So there's always something. If you come to the tasting room, there's always something, small production, new. And like I said, we have a wonderful winemaker who loves to play with different varieties and different wines. So there's always something new. If you came here in August and you came back in October or November, you would see something different.
Excellent. Well, now everyone who's been on the webinar has a secret benefit. You know that there's a secret stash behind the bar of the good stuff, the special stuff. So yeah, just ask. Yep. There's a couple more questions. I do want to take a second to see if our host Paulina has anything she'd like to interject at this point, and then I'll try to dig through a couple of some of the more specific questions, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely.
Paulina, anything you want to jump in and add right now?
I don't really have any particular questions. I would just make announcements in the end. Thanks.
All right. Well, then there's a couple of good ones that have come in on the chat window, and I'm still scrolling through that. The only ones I'm not picking are, I think, the ones we've already answered, so you may have missed some of that. We did have a question about are you able to ship small samples for people wanting to do their own tastings and wine clubs and things like that?
Absolutely. We do a wine club quarterly. I usually pick the wines, usually two white wines and a red. And also that we try to release the limited production wines. Someone also asked me about, I saw it come across as our social networking and influencers and wine writers and everything like that. Absolutely. It goes along with everything that we do. The social networking aspect. We have a great person in Melissa. And then the sending wines out to competitions like the Wine Spectator and Wine Enthusiast all the time. We send wines all the time because that's part of the industry. That's part of the rating system. We do all that. And influencers, absolutely. We have many influencers come into the tasting room to try the wines. We walk them through the facilities. It's all that change. If you from that aspect of the business, that has changed over the years tremendously, especially back in the 80s when there was nothing to now where everything is on social networking or Facebook or you take a picture and instantly send it out to 1,000 of your friends. So and customer service is key. We are a customer service based winery. Our customers are the most important thing to us, and we treat all our customers with utmost respect, and we're here to educate about wine and all those aspects of the business part, and having that customer base that comes every month or every summer and you get to know their names. It's a family business, and we run it like that. We're big and we're a big producer, and we make a lot of wines, but we're small at heart. And when you walk in, you feel welcomed and you feel warm, and that's, if you talk to my siblings, that's how we manage our business. We take care of our customers, and without them, we're not a business. So, and that's a true testament to our customer base, is because under the circumstances of the coronavirus, they weren't able to come out here and buy their wines or visit or get out of the house. But I tell you, they went online and they went into their local wine shops and they bought Pindar wine, and they supported us through the thick and thin. So you really know that you have a strong customer base and you have a strong brand, especially when you have to shut your doors and depend on someone either getting on the computer and remembering Pindar or walking into their wine shop and remembering Pindar. And they did. And that's a testament of 40 years of wine producing and customer service, which is the most important.
Well, on that note, I think there's only two things left on my list. One is if you could share some restaurants in New York that might carry your wines that we could try, for those of us who are Manhattan-based, or could try to taste the wine or order it to support you. And particularly, you'll get bonus points if they have outdoor seating right now. And of course, if you'd like to use this webinar as a chance to break out your TikTok dance and make it become a meme, we're happy to help contribute and share.
I'll send everybody to your local wine shop. That's the best aspect to have a bottle of Pindar. You can walk into your wine shop, you'll find most of our wines. As far as getting online, like I said, we can ship all our wines. If you go onto the website, there's plenty of descriptions about the wines. If you haven't had any of them, my recommendations, if you like a dry red, a Bordeaux style varietal, I would buy a bottle of Pythagoras. It's a great wine. And as far as all the varietal wines like Sauvignon Blanc, Rosé, they're all 2019 beautiful wines. 2019 was a great year. And then you'll always have the opportunity to come out for a visit. We're open, every day from 11 to 6. You can just walk into the tasting room and do a tasting and sit outside, listen to music. It's a beautiful, beautiful winery, and the North Fork is absolutely beautiful. There is pristine farmland. Like I said, it's absolutely beautiful out here. The beaches are pristine. And if I direct you to the restaurants, I would go to any restaurant in Greenport or across the island. Most of them carry Pindar wines. I would order seafood and have a beautiful glass of Sauvignon Blanc if I was.
Spoken like a local. So I think
Yeah.
that's the end of the questions I have when we're running up against our time. So since it's in the evening, I want to give Paulina a chance to say a few words. Thanks so much, Pindar. It was great learning about your business and your wines. And I'm going to try and visit you in August when I'm out there. But anybody else who's on the island, it's a great time to shop small and support your local businesses and your Columbia alumni colleagues. You got an enviable job out there. So good luck with the rest of this season.
Thank you very much. Great job.
This virtual fireside chat is so educational. I want to thank Jeremy and also Pindar, who did such a great job in educating us about wine and also the business trends in the wine industry. Columbia Business School Asian Alumni Club will actually host 2 more events. One is about overcoming your fear of virtual public speaking and gaining exposure in virtual meetings. As many of you, are required to work at home, it's not easy to make virtual presentations professionally and also making your points across. We have 2 distinguished Toastmasters who will be teaching this particular workshop in August on the 20th. In addition, I have invited 2 Columbia Business School alumni to conduct a seminar about investing during COVID-19 or during the pandemic on September 17th. And lastly, and most importantly, one of you, if you are Columbia Business School graduates or students, will win a few bottles of wine from Pindar's Vineyard. Thank you for the generosity of Pindar, who will ship the wine to this particular raffle winner. Okay, without, I want to thank all of you for attending this webinar. May you stay safe and well in this summer.
Thanks, everyone, for the good questions. Thank you, Pindar, and enjoy yourself a nice glass of wine.